By now, you've likely heard about Mahmoud Kahlil, the prominent protester against the war crimes that have been systematically carried out against Palestinian civilians by the Israeli military for as long as anyone can remember, with the overwhelming support of the ruling class of the United States. In case you haven't heard, he was arrested a few days ago by one of King Trump's goon squads, totally illegally. No warrant for his arrest, no charges filed, no crimes committed. You've probably also heard about immigrants being taken to Guantanamo and mistreated in various ways, including being placed in solitary confinement, which, although it is practiced with abandon in the U.S., is widely considered around the world a human rights violation. War crimes against civilians, human rights violations, contempt for due process. These are the norm in the U.S. Of course, it has always been this way. Don't listen to people who tell you that the U.S. is some bastion of freedom and human rights. Look at any honest history of the U.S. and you'll see that's bullshit. One thing that arguably isn't bullshit is the claim often made by Christians that the United States is a Christian nation founded on Christian principles. You heard me, it's not bullshit. Let's take a quick look at what Jesus himself has to say about war crimes, due process, and the rule of law. More than once in the Gospels, Jesus is seen salivating over the horrific destruction of the ancient towns of Sodom and Gomorrah, where a few people lived lifestyles that offended his dad. Or perhaps it was because they failed to be hospitable to guests. The reasons are actually not made clear. But surely the children and livestock could not be considered as sharing the guilt of the adults, even if all the adults in both towns had been guilty of some crime deserving being burned to death. Jesus is fully on board with this collective punishment, as we call it in modern times. Also in modern times, because we're so woke, we call this a war crime. But Jesus doesn't just endorse the massacres of the Old Testament. He goes on to celebrate the future punishment, worse than that inflicted on Sodom and Gomorrah, of several other towns where people rejected his so-called good news. And just in case he didn't make his feelings about collective punishment clear, there's the heartwarming parable in Matthew chapter 22, where an angry, righteous king who represents God sends his army to burn a city where a group of criminals happen to live. War crimes are celebrated by Jesus, and the U.S. participation in Israeli war crimes makes us good Christians, especially considering that Jesus was Israeli. Sorry, not sorry to all you bigots who want to believe he was white. As for Jesus' feelings about the rule of law, we can see them reflected directly in his behavior, where all four Gospels recount him assaulting people in the temple who were just going about their lives, not harming anyone, not doing anything illegal or even unusual, because he was personally offended. But just in case his behavior doesn't make it clear, there's the wonderfully illuminating and profoundly cozy tale of brutality in Matthew chapter 18, where an angry, righteous king who represents God orders the unspeakable torture by professional torturers of a citizen who has broken no laws, with no trial and no investigation, expressly because the king is offended by the citizen's behavior. If that's not a perfect endorsement of the arrest and detainment of Mahmoud Kahlil, I don't know what is. The U.S. is a Christian nation, founded very clearly on Christian principles, and living those principles in an exemplary fashion that would make Jesus proud. That's all I had to say. Thanks for watching.